Welcome to Everything CPA and Private Equity, where we unpack the evolving relationship between accounting firms, private equity, and other strategics. I'm David Wolfskehl, a partner at Whitman Transition Advisors.
And I'm Phil Whitman, CEO of Whitman Transition Advisors. And we've chatted with more than 150 private equity groups. We've actually closed over 40 transactions with those private equity groups. And we're bringing you firsthand insights from the front lines.
And whether you're exploring your first deal, putting your toe in the water, refining your strategy, we're here to guide you with real stories, expert advice, actionable takeaways. Let's dive in. Welcome to another episode of Everything CPA and Private Equity. So excited today to have Glenn Friedman of Prager Metis, such a good client of ours and certainly a friend of our organization on. And today we're going to talk from a managing partner perspective, what he's seeing, what he's thinking. And again, our goal is to give you information and education so that you learn more and you can make great decisions. So, Phil, welcome as well. And why don't you say hello and introduce Glenn, and let's start rolling.
Sure. Thanks so much, David. Hey, Glenn, it's great seeing you here this morning. So for those of you out there that don't know, my relationship with Glenn Friedman and Prager Metis dates back to when Glenn was just the Metis Group and a relatively small firm. We're probably going back to 2010, 14 years ago when I met him at the Terrace Club. I remember walking up to him and saying, "Everyone's been telling me I should meet you." He was like a celebrity. Even back then when he was a mere 14 million in revenue, or maybe even less. He's had tremendous growth. He's grown his firm from, the humble beginnings to a top 100 firm, a firm that's seen some great press in the news, some not great press in the news. And I look at Prager Metis and I see tremendous staying power, and under Glenn's leadership, it's amazing what he has put together. So Glenn, not only a great client, a great friend, and really looking forward to having this chat with you this morning, Glenn.
It's great to see you again, Phil and David. We haven't seen each other in a while, so that's a real special gift this morning.
Well, thanks.
Anyway, anything I can share with you, I'm happy to share.
So let's start talking a little bit about private equity. You've been an observer, right, of what's been going on with the industry. So why don't you start with here's some observations, here's some data points that are important to me from what I'm seeing from my vantage point.
I think that private equity has certainly invaded our space, if you will, for many reasons that are good for us, good for them. Maybe some of it we brought on ourselves. Maybe some of it is just because of an evolution, if you will. We work from, let's start at the beginning, right? For the most part, we work in a model that's a partnership model. It's not maybe the most efficient of models. And it also depends on funding or investment from partners. And there's oftentimes where you have two competing parties, right? You have younger partners and you have older partners. And younger partners don't always want to leave anything on the table because maybe they have their first home or children at school, and they need as much income as they can get. And older partners are faced with retiring at some point in time. So a partnership model is not always the best model to make investments. And today we have investments being made in technology and people, and it's very competitive. And it requires a great deal of expense, investment. And you also have regulations that are pressing on accounting firms and education. So more dollars are needed to compete in the future. And so private equity has looked at our model. They've seen these inefficiencies. They've seen the demand for capital. And at the same time, they've seen some other things that they've recognized in our industry. They've seen an industry that is sort of an annuity, if you will, right? So it's almost like buying a T-bill. So even if you're a private equity firm or a very large private equity firm that maybe isn't looking for 5 times of growth, maybe you're happy with 2 or 3 because you know that's a layup that can happen without any effort. If you look at most of our growth, most firms double every 5 years without an infusion of capital. So I think this is good for private equity and their portfolio. I think it's good as an investment, and I think private equity has recognized this. On the private equity side, I would say that it breaks down into a couple of different areas. You have private equity that has really worked hard to understand our industry. Some of them have hired experts or consultants, like frankly, Whitman Transition Advisors, or they've hired folks from our industry, and that shows a willingness to really understand the industry. And then you have folks that have not yet, maybe they will. You also have folks that are just following sort of a herd mentality. You know, when you have a group like Blackstone come in, probably every private equity firm out there is saying, well, we can't miss the boat. And then if you continue down that path, you realize that there are private equity firms that are of different size and have different strategic models and are looking for different size firms. You have everything from people taping small firms together to people looking for platforms. But I can tell you this, the industry will never be the same. It's forever going to change, just like the hospital industry. I just came actually from the car wash. Most every car wash I know is gone to a subscription. I think that what's put them in that mindset is private equity, frankly. If you go to the vet, most vets are owned by private equity today. So this industry is not going back. And you know, you have questions when you first come to the model or just speaking to private equity. You want to take care of everybody, right? You want to take care of your younger partners, your older partners, and your clients. You want to know that your clients are going to get the same level of service that they're used to getting. So these are all questions that you wind up having, and it can't just be a money grab. It has to follow a strategic plan. You have to get along with your partner. They might not be your technical partner when it comes to providing service, but they're your investment or capital partner, and you got everything has to align.
Hey, Glenn,
Yeah, sure.
I have two questions for you. I'm going to ask them one at a time though, because I don't want to confuse it. I'd like to get your thoughts. You've always been a firm that's been very, very acquisitive, and you've done a significant number of mergers, and even during this time where now everyone is holding out their hand for money up front. Some of the managing partners that we've spoken to have said, my, since private equity's come in, my pipeline of M&A opportunities has dwindled a little bit. Can you talk to that? What your thoughts are as it relates to that? And I know you're kind of laughing because you're going to say, "Hey Phil, you've even shared not as many opportunities as you used to." But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and the requirement for cash to get some of those larger deals done.
Well, that's a great point. And yes and no, you have not shared as many opportunities with us as you have in the past. But look, you follow the market, right? And if you have sellers that are looking for cash, you have to follow the cash. And accounting firms traditionally do not have the cash to buy accounting firms. And we used to do traditional deals where the purchase price would be sort of a deferral into a retirement benefit, and that doesn't exist anymore. It does to some extent. We're in the process of completing two transactions, and that's fantastic. But they're not easy to find. So we have to be aware that it's not just technology and regulation and better people that we need private equity for. In this market today, we need funds to do deals, plain and simple. Now,
So
there
my
are alternatives, right? There's borrowing, and there's, you can definitely go to various avenues to borrow funds to merge in a practice, but, accountants are risk adverse. So I'm not, if I go to my partners and say, hey, let's borrow several $1 million to buy a firm,
yeah.
that's not their business. So they're not going to just jump on the bandwagon. So it makes it more difficult to do a merger. Also, so what you're saying really, Phil, is private equity is a little bit defensive, not just offensive, right? And when you look at staff, we could lose an awful lot of staff to private equity, right? They're going to have options and bonus pools and um, many ways to entice away some really good and qualified people. And so some of the reason the toothpaste is out of the tube is from a defensive, not just an offensive standpoint.
What do you say to those that look at this and think that, like what happened with Y2K and, the real estate market, that this private equity coming into public accounting, that, there's going to be a bubble. Some people say that private equity could end up destroying our industry. What are your thoughts on those folks that are so negative about private equity coming in, and what your view is as to their commitment to the investments that they're making?
They don't want to lose money. They're not in business to lose money. So I don't really subscribe to the notion that there's a bubble. I would say this, that, obviously a deal just got done at like 15. I wouldn't assume that just on traditional accounting that goes to 20. In fact, my bet would be on traditional accounting, it can't get anywhere near 20. Because if you look at what other industries that are better leveraged sell for, it's around 20. And so yes, maybe with AI in 5 or 10 years, maybe it becomes a 20. But certainly in the near future, I don't think you get there. Could that back off and somebody that paid 15 wind up having to sell at 12 or 11 or 13? Happen. That's what investors do. They take a certain amount of risk. Um, have there been other cases where there's been buybacks, right, by companies that have sold to private equity? We all know that those things occur and can happen. I don't really look. I don't see that. I see that once you get a platform and you put some traditional beef on the bone, and then maybe look at other industries. I mean, look. I don't sit in the boardroom of Blackstone, but I don't believe that they bought that platform just to sell accounting services. Because first of all, if you know our industry, most firms are like 5 million or less. There aren't enough firms out there anymore to move a $2 billion firm to 4 billion. Right? So they have to be looking at other avenues. And my guess is they're looking at, digital and IT and AI and financial services and wealth management and insurance. And they're going to build something that's not going to look, for the most part, anything like an accounting firm. And it's going to be a financial service organization.
And to a great extent, Glenn, when I hear those services that you just mentioned, those add-on services, Prager Metis has done a wonderful job of doing these add-on advisory service offerings. When I look at the Blackstone Citron transaction at a multiple of 15 plus, as you said, how terrible would it be if, and I think phase one for Citron was acquire a lot of accounting firms. All right, they did some advisory service firms, not a whole lot, but if you may recall that when Citron did the deal with New Mountain, their wealth management group didn't come along. So for the past 3 years, they were missing a whole, a phenomenal opportunity with wealth management. So I kind of look at it and say, if a Blackstone as you said, focused on those other advisory areas, even if 5 years from now they sold at the same multiple of 15, but they expanded their profit margins considerably because of all the other advisory service offerings. So you wouldn't have the arbitrage on the multiple, but I think you'd still have a significant, increase, even if they were ultimately to sell at the same multiple. Um, as the trusted advisor, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, the ability for CPA firms to help cross-sell those other opportunities, to their loyal client base.
No, look, they might not get a 15, or they might get a 15. Frankly, I think if they grow in those other areas, they'll get more than 15. Because wealth management sells at 20. Um, Property and casualty sells at 20. So I think that, I don't know on the advisory side what that looks like. We haven't sold anything in that area. We haven't valued anything in that area. But I can tell you this, that as a trusted advisor selling into those services, it's a lot easier than making a cold call.
Amen.
When your client's looking for somebody to fill those needs, they're going to listen to you. Maybe not 100% of the time. Nobody listens to you 100% of the time. But 80% of the time, that's a lot easier than having somebody sit there, a team of people sit there going through phone call after phone call, email after email, saying, "Hey, I would love to take a meeting with you." So it's a natural, and that's what's going to happen. It's going to we have some of those affiliates, and it's a great relationship. And frankly, clients like it. They like knowing that their tax professional is talking to their financial advisor.
Hey, Glenn, when you think of a CPA firm, so whether it's a small firm or a firm like Prager Metis, which is a top 100 firm, the sheer number of clients that you have and that each partner works with, let's call it the one to many. Do you think that there might be an opportunity for private equity or some vehicle that they create for them to stay in our industry permanently? Because I would think through the CPA firm, when you look at the array of clients and different niches that you focus in, I would think it would be a tremendous feeder for, their next 5 or 10 ventures, just in looking at the client base of the CPA firm. So talk a little bit about, what you think the potential stickiness or permanency in changing in governance away from this partnership model might look like. Well, your
I don't
thoughts
think
on it?
private equity stays, right? Look, they have a fund, they raise money from investors, they have to return to those investors. That's their model. It's worked for them, it continues to work. So at some point, they do need to exit. And they're not in the business of operating it. Let's face it, they run very lean. They have investment teams. So I don't think they're going to stay in it. I can tell you this, though, that I've met a lot of private equity firms over the last year and a half, let's say 2 years, and several of them have come back and asked if they could partner with us and look at our client base, work with us towards succession planning, clients that want to sell, clients that understand private equity. And I think that's pretty smart on their behalf. So I think that we'll have relationships with many private equity groups, not just one. And they're looking for investments. They have to.
And so, Glenn, if we put on our crystal ball, we talked a lot about today, right, and the history of getting to this point. But if we went ahead 3 years from now, how do you think the industry will continue to change? Any thoughts what 3 to 5 years might look like?
Oh, we'll probably see one or two public offerings, right, which we haven't really seen yet. And frankly, if you think about Blackstone's exit, I would assume that it could either be some sort of fractional PE deal where other PE firms are banding together to buy that organization when they're ready to flip, or a public offering. But I do think that we'll see some body go public, maybe one of the big four. I think that we might see somebody come into our industry that hasn't ever been in our industry. That's a publicly traded company. I mean, when you think of it, I just actually was looking for a local doctor, and believe it or not, Amazon. And if you look, Amazon now has a network around the country of doctors. You could sign up for a subscription model that gives you access, basically a concierge service. And when you think about the technology that they offer, who's going to do that better than Amazon? Frankly, if Amazon wanted to buy up every accounting firm in the country, they probably could. And certainly they could go around the country signing up a bunch of small practitioners and creating a concierge service. So I have heard from private equity that there's some private equity looking at a subscription model to even out and guarantee revenue. So I think you're going to see a lot of different changes. You're certainly going to see an increase in the types of services that firms provide their clients, and you'll see more second bites. Some of probably the 4 or 5 firms that have been at it now for 2 years, a little bit, more than that, will have their second bite, just like Citron had their second bite, and life will go on, and the consolidation. But here's the other thing about our industry: the consolidation had to happen, because if you believe the statistics, that 75% of the managing partners or owners of firms out there will retire in the next bunch of years. What was going to happen with that? So it's here. I mean, you'll see many, many, many fewer firms, and that really begs the question: what kind of service will it be in?
What do you think, Glenn? I'm sorry, David. There are some firms that are sort of sitting on the sidelines and, are their mindset is we're, going to remain independent. This has been a good thing for us because, the firms that are doing private equity deals, they're losing partners. They're not servicing the clients as well. We're getting all sorts of client opportunities. What are your thoughts? And I don't know if you've heard that before or even seen that at your firm, but what are your thoughts? Is that a truism that these larger firms that take opportunities from private equity aren't servicing their clients as well and aren't retaining their partners? Or are they just people that, the firm would have given it a tap to and, are out there in the marketplace and would have been regardless of private equity? What are your thoughts on that?
Look, I've heard all of those things too, right? But at the end of the day, I try to look for reality through everything, right? And first of all, I do think that private equity has to be very careful, be very aligned partner group, mainly the younger partner. That's the first thing. The second thing is, when I hear complaints about firms, I've been here long enough, watched enough people talk about my firm to recognize that they have no idea what they're talking about. There's always going to be somebody that's. If you believe the press, our firm would have been out of business at least 15 times. And instead, we're very strong. We prosper. People love coming to work. Hopefully, we're providing people with a future, taking care of their families, right? So I don't really totally buy into any of that. There's always somebody that's going to be dissatisfied. If you went into my firm, you would find some people that are dissatisfied. You go into Citron, you're going to find some people that are dissatisfied. Having said that, I look to, are we getting any more resumes from? I mean, Here's Phil Whitman. He owns a talent solution team, right? With anybody out of any of those firms?
I haven't seen any resumes from any of them, and believe it or not, even when they're clients of ours, people refer those folks to us, and at the very least, we would say, we can't work with you because your firm's a client of ours, but we haven't seen partner resumes from any of those larger firms. So you're absolutely right, Glenn. I do have a quick follow-up. You mentioned that the private equity really needs to get aligned. And I think you mentioned, and especially with the younger folks, the younger partners, as sort of, and you mentioned that there were two camps, you got older partners, younger partners. As one of the more senior partners in your firm, and not just your firm, but for younger partners out there at any firm, what would your message to them be as it relates to the private equity opportunity? Is it good for them? Or are they missing an opportunity to sit in a seat that you senior guys once sat in? What are your thoughts on that?
So when I first started to look at private equity, number one, I was most worried about them. It was clear that the older partners were going to cash out to some extent. And so I was worried about the younger partners. And I learned something. One, I learned I wish I was younger.
Me too.
Yeah. Two, which I already knew, right? Two, I learned that there have been some situations where older partners maybe got a little bit too greedy, if you will. They didn't just take cash; they also took a majority of the role. And I think that doesn't really work. I think if you want to take the value of your firm that you built, nobody should be against that. But you got to leave the opportunity to build something more than you built and to really capitalize on that. And I think that they really do have that opportunity with private equity. Private equity is not going to stay in this. I mean, they will as an industry, but as a singular private equity fund, they're going to flip this. And to the extent young people get on board and understand that there's value in that equity, they're going to do quite well. So, look, I realized that about a week into my exploration of private equity that I wish I had a longer runway. But I don't. And this is still a tremendous opportunity and a blessing if it happens. As far as those firms that say they're not going to do it, look, I can only tell you this. I'm going to say 3 or 4 years ago, I had a conversation with a very large firm that did private equity. And they swore up and down, we have capital, we have cash, we have this, we have that. We're never, ever going to do private equity. And boom, they did private equity. So I would hesitate to take anything you hear about anything. I will do it. I won't do it. I just, just wait and see the way things play out. That's all I can say about private equity. My sense is it's going to be pretty hard to stand on the sidelines. Very hard.
Great.
Now look, we used to have 5 hospitals. We have 2 now. And in the state of New Jersey, I think every hospital is pretty much owned by two groups. So if you think you can stand in the way of this, you can stand in the way. And you can wait. And don't get me wrong. There's concierge doctors out there that decided to go into it. There's always going to be room for competition and for another way to go. But I don't. You're not going to get private equity to step down.
Great. Well, Glenn, any quick final thoughts as we wrap this up?
I think being an observer is great, but also got to get in it. And it's a time-consuming, effort by a lot of people in your organization. And I wish everybody the best of luck. It's just another change. We've seen so many in our industry, and it should be an opportunity and exciting for everybody.
Exciting opportunity. So, yeah, well, on behalf of all of Phil and David, big thank you to Glenn Friedman. Really appreciate you being our first guest on our podcast, and certainly something well-deserved based on our relationship. And always appreciate your insights and knowledge. So thank you very much, everybody. If you like what you're hearing, please subscribe. We want to educate, this industry and give you the nuances and inside looks as well. So thank you very much. And for everybody, go have a great day.
Thank you for tuning into Everything CPA and Private Equity. Every episode brings fresh insight. However, there's always more to talk about.
Don't miss an episode. Subscribe wherever you watch podcasts. Have a question or topic you'd like us to cover, we'd love for you to reach out to us.
Together, we will help you navigate this dynamic landscape so that we can help you achieve your goals. Until next time, keep making moves that matter.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.